Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you from... Hey, where the hell am I? What's this shackle doing on my leg? Hello? Hello? I'm your host, Conor O'Brien, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Martin O'Dwyer.
Just
Thank you. Thank you. I'm expecting my Oscar in the post any day now.
Yeah, do you know what? I think one of the best decisions we've made in the history of this podcast is to not tell each other what the intros are anymore.
Yeah. It's I genuinely love like the capturing the in the moment surprise of what we say.
It's usually not surprise though. It's usually one of us just being like, okay.
Yeah. Oh god, he went that way with it. Oh.
But in a good way. Yeah, but no, I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Do you want to reveal it, or are we just going to let people try and guess from context clues?
Well, firstly, Martin, I feel like there's some housekeeping to get out of the way. Last week on the podcast, we discussed... What did we discuss last week? Oh, Fiends, Demons, Devils, and the Satanic Panic. And I... at some point in the conversation, we started talking about a dungeon I recently ran. This is actually kind of nice to segue into what we're talking about this week, which is dungeons. We're talking about a dungeon that we ran, or that I ran, and then I had a puzzle at the entrance to said dungeon. And I think I asked the puzzle on the podcast last week, and I did not give it. I said, I'll come back to this in a few minutes and give the answer, and I don't think I came back to it, so I apologize.
We got deeply sidetracked by Tom Hanks.
By Tom Hanks in, what was it, Mazes and Monsters?
Mazes and Monsters.
Yeah, Robbie, it's not real. So, just to get this housekeeping out of the way, I'll say the puzzle and I will say the answer. Puzzle is, I have neither beginning nor end, but if one were to measure me, one would say that I am 8. Mortals know but a small part of me, and should they wait for me, they will certainly meet their fate. But the answer to this puzzle is eternity. So eternity has neither beginning nor end. If you measure it, it's 8 letters long. Mortals know but a small part of it, because they only live for a very small amount of time. And then should you wait for eternity, you will certainly meet your fate. You will die if you try waiting for eternity. So that's that. That's out of the way. Martin, dungeons.
Yes, indeed.
Segue.
Just for our viewers, my first guess of that was infinity, because I thought
you were very close,
and it would be an 8. Infinity is an 8 on its side. But no, that was a really fun puzzle, and thankfully we didn't spend like half an hour trying to figure it out.
You spent 7.5 minutes to do it.
Do you know what? That's about 6.5 quicker than I thought we would be.
I purposely wanted to make it a little bit tricky, but then I asked who else did I ask? I asked somebody in work, and they got it within a couple of minutes on my team. I said, hey, because we did a couple like icebreaker puzzles during our team meeting, and then I was like, oh, I have a puzzle I used this week. Do you guys want to hear it? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I said it to them. And then Elaine on my team got back to me within a couple of minutes, and she was like, is it this? And I'm like, yeah, well done. It was like the first guess as well. So
I just because I knew we'd be talking about it, I did actually, because weirdly I've only done like 2 like riddle puzzles when I've done dungeons in the game. So I was looking through them, and there was one I remembered, and I laughed really hard because I remember I sent it to you, and I sent it to other people, just be like, hey, do you know, would you mind having a look at this for me? I want, because it's like puzzles are kind of infamous in dungeoneering. It's puzzles and doors. Those will be the 2 greatest obstacles to your players.
Yes. Yeah. Puzzles are a weird one. I also find we this kind of folds in with what we're talking about in terms of dungeons, but puzzles are a weird one because you often find puzzles in dungeons. But I'm often like, why is there a puzzle in this dungeon? Like, unless your dungeon is an old temple or crypt to the god of knowledge, and they need to prove that you're smart enough to be able to proceed into here, why would you have the obstacle for proceeding be like a puzzle or a riddle or something that someone has to solve? If it's like, this is the ancient king's tomb, and his crown that bestows upon him one wish is buried with his body, and it's like, and there's a puzzle at the front door, it's like, why though? Like, why would you give grave robbers the opportunity?
that's you know what, that's very fair. I had one, and I thought it was pretty simple. It was one or two people that I passed it on to, outside of the party who were kind of struggling with it, but kind of Joe, when I gave them the answer, they were like, okay, that makes sense, and I was like, you know what, that's all right, I'll go with that. And it was so it was like a big, large, bronze circular door that blocked off a tunnel underneath this gold mine. It was three large serpents wrapped around each other, depicted at the center of the door. Draconic runes on the door read balance or protection they can provide, and name them to see inside. The answer was scales, because scale armor or balancing scales, and
Yes.
also snakes.
There was two answers.
No, as in like the one thing that ties snakes, armor, and balance together are scales.
Oh, I get you. Yeah, yeah, nice.
Yeah. So that was the answer, and I was a bit worried, you know, because like a few people, I think one person got it straight away. When I sent them outside party, and I think I sent it to you, and I sent it to, a couple other people I worked with, and like, I think you got it after a few shots, and then other people got it, and there were sort of varying levels of success. So I was like, you know what, I think this will work. We'll go with it. I'll test it. I have the rules for solving puzzles in the book if I need them to help the guys out.
I believe Tasha's has some mechanics for giving hints as well.
Yeah,
that revolve around intelligence checks or something like that.
it's there's different, depending on what kind of a hint, it'll give you a different ability.
Right.
Ability challenge. Is that the right word? Is that right?
Skill challenge.
Skill challenge. Jesus, thank you. But yeah.
You only co-host a D&D podcast,
I
Martin.
know. But do you know what was the one thing I didn't account for when I was making that puzzle?
No.
That I had a translator in my party who spoke 3 languages and read a shitload.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, oh, this might take them a while. And everyone else in the party was throwing out answers. I was like, no, it doesn't work. And he was just quiet for about, I don't know, minute and a half. And then just went, scales. And I was like, God damn it. I'm impressed, but also, God damn.
I feel like that's the constant state of a DM, is to be impressed. I'm impressed, but damn you. Because your job is to kind of set up obstacles and challenges for the players. And you're like, I both want them to be stumped by this, but also overcome it.
Yeah.
So there's that constant, like, you've solved the puzzle, or you've defeated the bad guy, and you're like, congratulations, but also damn you, that took me a lot of planning.
Yeah, I think it's like when someone does something like that, and they like either think of a creative way around your puzzle, or they like just solve it like straight away in like a really impressive manner. It's like, for me anyway, as a DM, it's like 97% pride and happiness for the person, and then like 3%, god damn, I want that to last a little longer.
Yeah. I think as long as it lasts an appropriate amount of time, that you feel like they were adequately challenged, and then they succeed, then you're like, good, they were challenged, but they overcame it. That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, pretty much.
Martin, do you use dungeons in your game? We talked about dragons. It's about time we talk about the dungeons.
I've only used them a couple times. A lot of the times I will do, like, fortresses have showed up quite commonly in my games, but not all of them have been like dungeon crawls.
What I will say is, like, when it comes to like dungeons, we call them dungeons and dungeon crawls, but in reality it doesn't have to necessarily be an underground stone structure. A dungeon crawl can also be through a cave, or it could be through, like you said, a fortress, or a mansion. You know, you could be going room to room instead of an enormous manor or house or something like that. It's more so the act of, I guess, navigating room to room in some kind of structure. You know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an underground thing or anything like that. But I mean, like, yeah, I think you mentioned before you had a was it a 5-tier tower fortress for the werewolf baddie?
Yeah.
And you kind of dungeon crawled them through that up through each of the levels.
Yeah. It was like it was a 5-floor thing. The boss fight was on the 4th floor, so they had 3 floors of puzzles / traps to kind of navigate their way through. I think it was 2 trap floors and a puzzle floor, and then the boss fight was at the end.
What was the 5th floor then?
The 5th floor was a library belonging to the boss, where they found some useful info. Some lore, some fun stuff like that.
Very cool. Yeah, and like I think that's the kind of typical structure. And I think honestly 5 is maybe the typical or kind of length, or maybe 3 to 5 would be the amount of rooms you kind of expect someone to go through. Like you can have mega
Yeah.
dungeons. You can have dungeons that are just utterly crazy in size and loads of different twists and turns. Um, but I think there's Fistful of Dice.
Vaguely, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he has YouTube videos and he has done for a long time on D&D. He does a lot of really cool stuff. I remember he talked about a dungeon before, or how he builds dungeons, and he doesn't draw or map them out in any crazy detail. He'll literally draw like a square and he'll mark that as like entrance hall, and then he'll draw another square and he'll be like central chamber, and then he'll have two lines coming off that, almost like a hierarchy or a family tree kind of chart where they're
Yeah.
kind of connected like that. Um, and typically there's like 3 or 4 rooms, and you can choose to go left or right, and then you get to so one of those is going to be your three, the left room or the right room, and then both of them link up to four, and that's the boss. And then five is potentially like you had, it's either like treasure or lore or like something valuable
Yeah.
beyond the boss, or in some cases it's like a hidden room where you're like, oh, we got to the boss's room and this looks like it's the end, but actually there's a hidden door in the back, and if you go through it, you get this extra thing. And it's a very simplified breakdown of how to do them. Personally, I like mapping them out myself. Because I'm a very visual person like that. I like to
Mm.
have a map that I can look at. But that was a very how would you put it, bare bones breakdown of how it works. You should have an entrance slash entrance hall. You should have a some sort of like maybe center or off or side rooms that you go through, and you can make decisions. Do we go through this door here, or do we go through the door on the right hand side? And there could be consequences and rewards based on that. But I thought it was a very, if you build on that, I think you could build some really really brilliant dungeons that only take 5 or so rooms, and don't end up being overly complicated or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. I actually tend to lay out my dungeons in a similar fashion, where like if I'm doing them, particularly if I'm doing them on Roll20, as we've been playing virtually for the last year or so, I will literally just do like, I'll just use the box tool on Roll20, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, similar thing, like big square, entrance hall, then like a line off this way, box here, guard house 1, guard house 2, that leads down to like the main hall. So like I actually did pretty much exact. I'm actually basically describing the run up to the boss fight they had just before the werewolf leader. They were in an area influenced by Maladomini, that part of hell, and they were in this like ruined temple going through. So when they got in there, they were sneaking through each room, and I prepared literally like that, like a dungeon crawl map. So the first square was the entrance hall where they were in. There was one open door, then that way one closed door. This way the open one was the guard house 1, the closed one was the guard house 2. And I would give like context clues as to what happened and how the place got here and what happened in there in each of the rooms. So like there's no room without a purpose, even if there's nothing in there. The way you describe how the room itself is like disheveled or damaged or in whatever state it's in can give contextual clues to what happened there. So those were my first 3. Then I had one main hall that led to one main hallway that led to the main hall, which was a big open area. And then the main hall led to the throne room. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, and then 2 at the side here. And then in the throne room, I had 2 stairways, one off either side, that led up to balconies that I had done off as a separate box beside the box that I'd done for the throne room. And then, just like you were saying, I had a 5th area that was the tomb, the crypt for the royal family. That was where it was built. It's actually built in under the floor of the throne room, but the thing was a tunneling monster, and it actually came up out through the floor. So as it kind of emerged to start the boss fight, it broke open the entrance to the secret area. So they killed the thing, and then, oh look, there's a big hole down here. We should probably look in this hole that this giant monster came out of and see what's down here. And yeah, then that's where I put like a bunch of loot, and because it was a lower important dungeon, I could put like lower appropriate loot there. So like it was a Grecian style temple or palace. So like I gave there was like a javelin of lightning bolts. That's it, isn't it? That's it, isn't it?
Javelin lightning bolts or javelin of lightning.
Javelin of lightning.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the hammer of thunderbolts and the javelin
Yes,
of lightning.
yeah.
So there was a javelin of lightning in there, and like because it was a Grecian kind of Roman style thing, I had it literally look like a lightning bolt, like Zeus's lightning bolt. in there, and then like put in like journals and other kind of things that were like rewards that were influenced by the area. And I think that's a very like both efficient and kind of fun way to do it, because you can very quickly build out your basic structure of the dungeon. And then once you have it all kind of built out, you decide like, how many rooms do I want, how big is it going to be, how big are the rooms, that kind of thing. You can then kind of just look at everything here and be like, okay, this is it, this, and this, and you can kind of give each piece a little function and also a little bit of description or lore to it. If you're trying to, if it's like a lore significant dungeon, not just like, like the bandit camp outside, like that first bandit camp you come to in Skyrim or whatever outside of
Riverwood.
Riverwood, was it?
I think
it's been so long since I played Skyrim.
I haven't played in a long time. You raise a really good point there about treasure and stuff like that. I mean, typically the treasure is in the back of the dungeon. It's in the last room is the treasure room, or the room beyond the boss room is the treasure room. Do you ever dot treasure in other rooms and like side passages and stuff like that?
Yeah, like if I know there's like a difficult fight coming up, I might do like a side passage out here that you can go and explore, but there might be like a trap in there, or it might just like require a specific kind of skill challenge. See, I remember at that time to get through, and then at the end, say if it's a particularly difficult fight, there might be like a potion of resistance hidden away down there, or maybe some healing potions, or like
those things don't go off, by the way.
So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, Joe, you. Sorry, my PC just started making a very worrying noise there. But yeah, sometimes I would do that. But in general, if it's anything like particularly big and impactful, unless I already want it in the player's hands before they go into the fight, I will usually have that either hidden away or guarded by the boss.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I would definitely be kind of a similar vein. I mean, I would never put something of critical story importance, something that I really want the players to have. I would never just put that in a side passage and be like, you're going from room 1 to room 2 to room 3 just in a straight line basically, and the boss is in room 3. I would, if there was a room 2A and 2B, and 2B was the offshoot room, it's important, one, I think, to potentially, and again, this depends on the layout of your dungeon. If your dungeon's very linear in that you're going to definitely hit these rooms, and maybe you go room 1, 2, 3, and then rooms 4, you 4A and 4B, you can either take the left tunnel or the right tunnel, but then they link up with room 5. Like you have a little bit of options.
Yeah.
That's probably the simplest way you can do it. But there is some tunnels and some dungeons that will have overlapping things, and you can choose very unique paths to go through it. I think it's important that stuff that may be hidden in offshoot rooms that could be rewards for exploration is not story critical, because sometimes players will go into a dungeon and they're like, we're here to kill the dragon at the end of the dungeon. We can't afford to faff about and waste our resources and all these traps and other things that might be down here. We just got to go straight for the gold, get this dragon killed and done. If we're still okay after that, maybe we'll explore a little bit more,
You've basically just described my attitude to dungeoneering.
Well, yeah, but that's to say, this is how I know it though, because I view my party. But yeah, so like that could be a thing. But I mean, like there's also, like you said, sometimes there's rewards to exploring before you get to the end. Like you said, you might find a potion of resistance or a couple of health potions, and those might be very important, or those might be very what's the word?
Critical,
beneficial to you being able to succeed the dungeon. Maybe these are put here because the DM is going to be giving you a helping hand, but maybe just it's something that can be helpful. Maybe there's a dagger in this offshoot. I actually did that once with a one shot I ran, where I knew I basically had the lads going through, and it was kind of like that. It was mostly linear, but there was one offshoot chamber that the guys could use to circumvent a fight. Now, it was a fight with some elven rebels. If they circumvented it, they went through a side cave passage, and they had to fight a shambling mound instead. But inside the shambling mound, inside of its mass, there was a short sword of ghosts or like undead slaying. And I knew the final boss in this thing was like a ghost, an undead. Okay. So I'm like, if you can barrel through and you can hit those guys, get straight to the end, and you'll probably still be fine dice rolls depending with the final boss.
Probably.
But if you explore a little bit, to be fair, she was kind of hairy in that one shot. But if you explore a little bit, you never know what you can find. And I think one important thing when it comes to putting treasure, particularly treasure that isn't the end of dungeon treasure, an important factor of putting that into the dungeon is that there should be risk and reward involved. So, for example, if there's a side passage, it's a side passage. You know that up these stairs ahead of you is where you need to go to fight the dragon. But there's this side passage. Maybe you go down there and there's a fight. Maybe there's a golem or something like that inside of here. You have to defeat the golem. But if you defeat the golem, that required, you might come across something interesting. Funny, actually, Wabu, who played by our friend Mike, who's in our game, he has a sword, which is basically a sun sword or one of the many variants of sun sword, and I call it Dawnheart. He got that in a side passage.
Yes, actually.
In the well. You guys had to fight a skeletal golem, a bone golem, which was not a mandatory fight. You could have gone a different way or proceeded a different way, but you chose to go this way instead. And because he came across that, he ended up getting Dawnheart, and that's a weapon he used frequently. Whereas when it lets him, because Mike, it's a good aligned sword, and Mike isn't always the most well behaved, so the sword doesn't always work for him. But yeah, so I think there was risk reward there, that you knew you had to get to the end of this tunnel to rescue someone. There was probably going to be a big fight, and there was. But in order, like, you guys end up doing this side fight, which drains some of your health and some of your resources, but in the end, ended up with Wabu getting a really, really cool sword. So, sometimes I think there's important to have the risk reward. You don't want to be like, I went down this side passage and got this magnificent set of armor, and all I had to do was walk into a room, grab the armor, and walk back out. There's no. Yeah, it's not earned. It's not earned. And it doesn't make for good storytelling.
I always try and strive for like that. Feel like, do you ever play like the original Doom?
Which?
The original Doom, like Doom from like 1990.
Not in years. I had it on like my Windows 95 PC.
Yeah, but so like in Doom, like there was a lot of exploration, a lot of secrets that you could find, and like it was one of those things where like anytime you did find a secret, there would be some element of challenge to it. There'd probably be like there'd probably be like some imps there, or maybe like there'd be one or two difficult enemies guarding it, or you'd have to do like a jumping puzzle to get to it, and like so it always made, by doing that, first of all, actually finding it to get into the challenge first gave you a sense of earning something to it, and then once you had that discovered, then if you were good enough, you were able to earn another reward, like armor or like quad damage or whatever the hell it was. And like I think that's just such a good philosophy, in that like not only do you reward them for exploring and just looking around in general, but you give them like a skill challenge or something to overcome, to like essentially like prove themselves, or kind of like give them opportunity to show off, and use something they're good at to gain a benefit for themselves.
That was kind of it's funny you mentioned about like hidden areas and stuff like that, because that was back in the day where like graphics were not good enough that you could be like, this wall looks very slightly different.
Yeah,
and maybe it's like it's just another wall, and it would just like lower or move or something like that. It's like I would have no way of detecting
up, and you'd be like, oh, there's like another entire area. What? Oh, cool.
yeah, but it would not be recognizable as a way you could go through, just because the graphics made everything look kind of like the same blurry blob of color.
Yeah, that game was a lot of fun though, man. The OG Doom. I remember someone installed that on like all of the computers in our school's computer lab one year, and it was just there in the middle of ICT, and you just hear like click, 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 click.
Hey folks, sorry about that. Technical Nothics difficulties. Those tricky one-eyed bastards. But we're back now. Yes, so we were just discussing about like secrets in Doom and kind of dungeons and stuff like that.
I was saying, like, that's the kind of philosophy I like to take when, like, if I'm like hiding a secret or a reward in a dungeon. I think that's like a great way to do it. But like, reward them for the exploration, challenge them a bit, and then give them an equal reward for the exploration and the challenge. Yeah,
definitely. There's that's actually one thing that I feel like I don't really include ever, but I probably should, is hidden doors. I don't think I've ever put a hidden door into. Well, no, sorry. One time, there was a bar you guys had to go into in place called Murderstone in the first campaign, and the bar, like, you watched a bunch of like the criminal guys go in there, and you're like, right, let's bust in and we'll fight them. And you went in, and the bar was completely abandoned except for 3 mimics, which you soon found out. But in the back office, there was like a book on a table, but it was fixed to the table, and if you open the book, it's like hollow, and there was like a switch you could flick to open the bookcase thing. And I think it's the one time I've used a hidden door. I don't really use them, but I probably should, because again, that's the kind of thing that if someone decides I'm going to have a look around for traps or for something, and they roll investigation, if they're all high enough, you could be like, you don't find traps, but there's a little seam on the wall here,
Yeah.
you know, and that could be interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think I've only used hidden door once myself as well, and it was a door hidden with an illusion spell, because I knew that my party pretty much always pop detect magic as soon as that thing funky starts going. Like, oh yeah, detect magic. Yeah. So yeah, they were looking around, no one, and because it was hidden with an illusion, a magical illusion, the investigation check, for just looking for traps and stuff like that, you didn't roll particularly high enough there. You passed it, and I was like, oh, okay, they're not going to discover the secret way the assassin's been moving through the sewers. That's fine. That's fine. And then like my sorcerer's like, I cast detect magic, and I was like, yes. there's a roughly door-shaped area of magical aura is in front of you.
Do you ever do the thing where you purposely make something in the tunnel because you know one of your players would easily overcome it normally, so you make it like a special version? Like, if I think you had dark vision last campaign, and I can't remember any specific instance, but I'm pretty sure at some point you were like, oh, I can see through this because I can see through magical darkness because of my warlock abilities. And I was like, but this is special magical darkness and you can't see through it. And I wasn't doing it to be like fuck you can't see what's in it. I was doing this to be like just to be like, oh, but it's creepy, because if I'm trying to be like, it's so dark and scary, and you go, not for me, I'm like, well, shut the fuck up, because you're undermining my spookiness here. So I'd be like, but it's special darkness.
Yeah,
it's totally. Even darker.
I think like
what's it, the thing in SpongeBob? Oh,
advanced darkness.
Yeah, it was advanced darkness. You can see in darkness and non-magical darkness. You can't see in advanced darkness. There's no rule for that.
I think it's fun to do stuff like that and like pitch not only to your players' strengths but also to their weaknesses. Like one of the dungeons I ran before, that was the old incarnation of my party. So not a strength-based character between the 4 of them. Like, I think the highest strength in the party was 13. So they were going through it. It was actually the same dungeon from the puzzle, the scales puzzle. So they gone through a few floors at this stage, and I'm describing how they're walking down this like wide but shallowly angled like slope that leads from a tunnel, from this like circular tunnel that leads directly down to the next area, just in a big slope. And they were like, okay, cool, yeah. And they're like walking down. And if you've never seen Indiana Jones, a giant rock boulder came through that tunnel pretty sharpish when someone stepped on the wrong stone. And for most parties, a rock trap like that would be pretty easy, pretty handy. Because I think you just need like an athletics check of like 13 to beat it, to just outrun the boulder.
Outrun the boulder, yeah.
Not when.
But if you don't, you brought this up on the podcast before. Like, if you don't outrun the boulder, you end up as a pancake.
Yeah, you get. I think it took like 3d6 bludgeoning damage and got knocked prone 10 feet away. And so average strength score in my party was like -1. So it was a real, like, it suddenly became very tense from them when we'll outrun it to no, I need the checks. Okay, you fail, and you pass. You fail, you pass, and you pass. You fail, you pass, and you pass. Oh, there's one person left. Yeah, the boulder's about 10 feet away now. Another check to make the last 10 feet.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
I think I had you doing something very similar to that, actually, but it wasn't a boulder.
I remember this really well, actually.
You guys were... Which one are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of the one where it was like, I can't exactly remember it, but I just remember it as one of a very memorable like trap / hazard encounter, where we were going through. It was like a tunnel or like a cave system, and there I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something at the end of a hall that was either like coming our way that was like destroying everything it came in contact with, like an oblivion sphere or something, and we have to get up through this, like we have to like run it down through, and then the very last thing was like make a jump through this gap to get outside the thing. And I just remember, like, it was like, I jump, I fly, I turn into a bat and fly through. It was just like all of us like shit.
Yeah, it was. You guys were in a place called Onyx Tomb, and the whole place had basically been possessed by shadow beings from the negative energy plane. And as a result, all the light in the area had been sucked out, so it was in a state of constant darkness. And in order to get into the keep, you went into a tunnel underground, and it was dark outside. It was dark in the tunnel, no real difference. And at one point, I described, and you had a couple levels in Warlock.
I had Devil Sight by then, yeah.
And you had Devil Sight, and you were staring down the tunnel. And I was describing, it's dark all around you anyway, but it's particularly dark down that tunnel. And I think that's when you actually said, not for me, I can see through magical darkness. And I said, you can't see through this. And you were like, no, what is it? And I'm like, don't know. And then, but it was going like, it was making like a. I don't know if that'll pick up on the mic.
None of that came through because of our sound muffle and stuff.
Well, god damn it, because I wrecked my throat doing that. But yeah, it was basically making this kind of like breathy, like, I don't know, like raspy inhale kind of sound. And it was moving towards you. Like it was just a wall of shadow and void that was coming at you. And you guys all ran, and you had decent strength, and like we had a monk who had insane speed,
I could
and
fly
a couple
by
of
then as
rogues
well.
who could, yeah, there was a couple of rogues who could dash and dash as an action and a bonus action, but Mike was playing a sorcerer and wasn't able to do any of that. He was running, but I'm like, I had to make an athletics checks. He's also not particularly strong, and in the end, he actually let you guys go on ahead. He was like, no, go. Everyone else go on ahead. And then he waited until you guys got up there, and you guys kind of confirmed for him that there is safety or respite up here, and then he dimension doored. So like, I feel like you can still put in something that maybe it's not designed to catch a player out, so to speak, but it's designed to challenge a certain player. Because obviously, if you have our current party, for example, if I did that with the current party, we have 2 barbarians with insane strength, which would have no problem rolling at good athletics checks to run away from this kind of thing. But then we have a blood hunter who's dex based and doesn't have particularly good strength, and then we have a sorcerer warlock combo who also doesn't have very good strength. Those two would struggle trying to run away from something like this. And it's not that we're like, you wouldn't be targeting them necessarily, but you're like, this is a challenge. And then maybe it could be a case that, hey, because the blood hunter rolled so poorly on the athletics check, but maybe you as Lug, the barbarian, got a natural 20. So maybe you're like, can I just pick him up and run with my natural 20? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And it's about that kind of creative problem solving where you're like, he's clearly not able to keep up with us. I will pick him up and I will run because I'm very, very strong, and that's no problem for me.
Yeah, no, I think like it's not like you're picking on anyone. I look at it like it's like you're adding a couple of chili flakes to the soup, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. You should be. Honestly, I don't really think about it terribly often. I will put in challenges that I think are appropriate. I rarely, and this I got from Matt Colville, and this might seem like a little bit of an asshole DM thing to do. It's not my problem to solve these things. That's your problem as the players. I will challenge you, and it's up for you to solve the challenge. Not in a way that I'm going to be like something really bad. Here's a really bad situation. Sort yourself out. But here's a challenge. I think you should try to. I want you to creatively adapt to it. But I do think it's a good mindset to have, because also and this kind of plays into what we're talking about in terms of planning a dungeon, planning a D&D session, planning anything surrounded by D&D and being a dungeon master can be incredibly draining and can be a lot of work sometimes. And if you basically sit down and you're like, I want to give them this particular door or this particular trap or whatever, or this puzzle, and you have to sit down and then go, right, I have 5 people in my party. One is this class, one is this class, one is this class. This person has this ability, this spell. and then you're trying to see, is there enough justifiable ways that they can resolve this? You'll go mental, and you'll never get past the first trap slash encounter that you had planned for that dungeon, because you'll spend the entire week in preparation trying to figure out the different combinations of ways. It's not your job as a dungeon master to figure this out. It's up to the players to, like, you guys did a dungeon this week just gone. I put a big blue gem suspended above a bridge, that cast chain lightning on you, which was 8d10. Is it 8d10 damage?
That sounds about right for what it felt like. Yeah.
It hit you guys really hard. I basically put it there. I'm like, okay, I know the room is a certain size. It's set that if you step foot in the room, it will target you, and you have to make a dex save or whatever to avoid being shocked. And it ended up being quite deadly because the warlock decided, I'm going to run up and cast Detect Magic on it. Well, not quite run up, but get closer. The problem is Detect Magic has a range of 30 feet. The gem also has a range of 30 feet because the room is like 60 foot in diameter.
Yeah, you detected that, all right.
He knew. It definitely notified him that it was aware, as a big bolt of lightning just struck him. But yeah, so like, but I didn't have a resolution sorted out there. I'm like, are they going to try and blow it up? Are they going to try and dispel it? Are they going to try and, I don't know, maybe I'd do anything else? There's a bunch of different stuff you could try and do. I did not sit down and think, are there at least 5 ways the guys could resolve this? I feel like, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, I'm one person coming up with challenges. Yeah. You are 4 people trying to resolve them.
Exactly.
4 brains are better than 1. So I'm confident that you guys can do it, and it's maybe a trust bit as well, where I'm like, I wouldn't do something. You guys, I think you guys trust me. I hope you would trust me.
Totally.
To not put a challenge in your way that would be instantly deadly, or so challenging you could never conceivably solve it. And likewise, I trust you guys because I know you're good players and good role players, and I know you're all smart. I know you guys could sit down and resolve challenges that I put in your way as well, you know?
Yeah, I think, like, geez, there's probably, like, the one that probably stumped us the most in recent memory that I can think of, it was probably just the swim to get to, why can I not think of this goddamn city's name now?
I'm blanking on myself.
Oh, damn. This is bad.
It was the Earth Elf place.
Vishalai.
Vishalai was the Fire Elf place.
Crap. It's the inverted city.
Ulthref.
Ulthref, yes, Ulthref. Yeah. So like that's the one, like, of all of them that stick out in my head, like it's that one and like the lava tunnel, and the lava tunnel just hurt me real bad. It did nearly kill one of us.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could have. I mean, lava is, we've talked about before, is exceptionally deadly in D&D in terms of it's like 10d10 fire damage, and
if you're submerged, yeah,
or 18d, yeah. If you get fully submerged, it's like 18d10 fire damage. Yeah. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. But like that one, just because like with the, and as well, I think because of the really stupid yet creative way we came up with of resolving it, in that, like, I had the con to hold my breath no problem for the swim. It was like a 4 minute. It was like a 4 minute
I think swim. You have a con of 4,
18.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I think the way you can hold your breath is 1 plus your con mod.
So
and I think I said it was a 4-minute swim, so you were comfortably able to do the swim. The problem was, Aerith, who is our blood hunter. So you had 2 barbarians who could hold their breath no problem. One of them's a turtle, so you can hold it for an hour. We had a warlock who had a brace, or a magical brace, that allowed him to cast water breathing on himself, or
it was Alter Self, wasn't it, to give himself?
It's Alter Self, but it's the aquatic adaptation feature of that. So the 3 of them are fine. We have a blood hunter who I believe has a +2 to his con, and then have so it's 1 + 2 is 3, so he can only hold his breath for 3 minutes, but it's minimum a 4-minute swim there.
Yeah.
And you guys have to figure out a way to resolve that. That's right. You basically you used your water skins. I think you got a couple of them, and you basically just kind of bought some air in it and plugged it, and you're like, okay, this will be, most of another breath, which should hopefully get you another minute. So you can exhale after like 3 minutes, and then you could just take this and suck all the air out of this bag, and that's another breath. So you should be able to make it, and he did in the end.
Just.
Say that again.
Just.
Just. I think
Yeah.
I still had to make an athletics check just to kind of
Yeah.
because his lungs would have burned at something fierce at that point. So I was like, but yeah, you made it. And I think that's again, I didn't have a solution in mind for that. You also had to solve that tunnel. That took you a long time to navigate because it was basically a labyrinth of submerged tunnels and they crisscrossed back and forth. And even you guys who can hold your breath for like 4 and 5 minutes and stuff like that, or it's still like I had the turtle went back in by himself into these tunnels and was just like, I'm going to continue searching because I can hold my breath for an hour at a time. And it took him a few turns while you guys were short resting and stuff like that. Aerith almost drowned.
Yeah, I had to give him air on the way out. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And like he very very nearly drowned. He dropped to 0 hit points and just started drowning immediately. So it was a pretty hairy situation. But again, I trusted you guys to come up with a reasonable solution to that. Based on what you have, it's a MacGyver situation, and you very much did.
yeah, I think there's a lot of like faith and good judgment that goes into like skill challenge building in a dungeon, and same with traps as well. Like you have to use a bit of good judgment, but also just have faith in your players that they're either A, smart enough or B, creative enough to get out of it and use their skills and stuff creatively.
And players have faith in your DMs, and assuming those DMs are good people.
Yeah, we're not trying to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. I have
The
faith
monsters
in your DMs.
are not the DM. The monsters.
Exactly. I don't want to kill you, but the T-Rex wanted to eat you.
I don't want to kill you, but Grubthactity Baller is real angry.
Oh God, the baller!
shout out to Jesse Cox for that. I think that was one of his old WoW or Diablo characters.
Oh
He
wow!
mentioned it one day. Grubthactity Baller.
It's actually like an Italian name. It's actually D apostrophe baller. It's the baller.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, but do you ever think about when you're building a dungeon? Do you think about like the theme that you're trying to get across with this dungeon? Or do you just have like caverns and caves and old ruins, or is there sometimes like more that you try to pepper in terms of like theme and setting and atmosphere?
Yeah, I'll go a lot off of I'll do a lot of stuff based on say one of the first things that like so okay, like how big does it need to be, and then I'll go okay, where is it, and then I can kind of plug in monsters and hazards based on the kind of environment that it's in, and like because there are specific monsters that will only show up in specific areas, and then like you're not going to get a lava hazard in like the frozen north, although Iceland is a place.
It's actually funny you mentioned that because I was doing some stuff on my map during the week, and I thought of this area that's basically a series of northern islands, but and they're up at the frozen northern sea and stuff like that, but they all have active volcanoes on them. So it is very much a bunch. You would absolutely find lava and stuff like that running through tunnels and flowing down the sides of mountains in this Arctic environment.
Yeah, not generally though.
No, typically no.
Yeah.
Like you said, Iceland is a place.
Yeah, Iceland is a place, which is literally a very cold place made up mostly of volcanic rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of the way I would go off. I'll use like environmental factors and and stuff like that to kind of key in on what exactly I want to put in there.
I typically tend to. I think I'm maybe again in my typical obsessive fashion, where I do more than I know than I have to. I will often have too much of an idea of what something is and what it's about, and I need to turn off that part of my brain sometimes. Like, for example, I had you run through a dungeon once called the Well, and it was basically this fortress that was on the surface, and then humans and elves were warring to basically hold this vital stronghold on a kind of border, I guess. And because of all the magical spells that were being flung across the battlefield and stuff like that, the magic kind of reacted to each other and it ricocheted, and it caused this mental, catastrophic magical effect that caused the fortress to be sunken into the earth and into a chasm below.
That's one of my favorite settings that we've been to in the game so far. It's just so like creepy. I love it.
It was but I was actually inspired because there's this place, and I can't quite remember the name of the mission or anything, but there's this place in Skyrim. If you go to What's the name of the big city in Skyrim?
Windhelm?
No, other side, on the western side. I can't remember the name for it right now. It's the capital place. It's a place that's up on the big shelf that reaches over the harbor there.
Right.
There's the Blue Palace, I think, is the name of the structure on it. But if there's a mission you do there where you kind of start investigating the Wolf Queen something, I forget her name. But she's been dead a long time, but she was a necromancer, and there's this whole kind of arc there. And you go to this cave not far from that town, and in this cave, you're underground, but there's like one of the fortresses you'll find on the surface in Skyrim underground, and that kind of inspired me for it. And when you guys were there, I was like designing the whole thing. And I knew the themes I was trying to go for here was one, I wanted to be very like, ghosts. I wanted to be a little bit Azkaban-ish in terms of prison, and I wanted it to be like full of ghosts who are the guards and the warden and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, ghosts in prison were basically it. And I think I got a bit of a Azkaban vibe running there, but I had to turn off the part of my brain that was like, okay, so if prisoners are brought in here, then they'd probably be like, brought to cells on this side, but then there's this other part here where the guards need to go, and like I'm trying to make it logical in my head. Your dungeons don't have to be, and do you know what? Your players won't pick up on that. If you have a room and you just go, this is the the mess area for this bandit hideout, your players honestly won't really care if the kitchen is then 5 rooms over. Like they're not going to be like, that doesn't make structural sense. Surely they would have placed the kitchen right next to the mess area. Don't worry about it. And I had to turn off that part of my brain that's like, but why would there be a guard room right next to the prison cells? And it's just, yeah.
That makes sense though.
That would. I forget I said that.
Yeah, we'd forget about that, and we'd forget about Iceland.
Why would there be a guard room, like a guard's sleeping quarters, right next to the blacksmith's forge when he's hammering away on an anvil all day? There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, but again, it doesn't have to make sense, and your players won't pick up on that. They just want to know what's in the room, what can I kill, where's the treasure. Let's keep going. Let's keep exploring the dungeon. They want to interact with things. They're not gonna pull you on stuff like that. And actually, one thing that stopped me or made things difficult when I was trying to write a layout or draw a layout of a dungeon, if you're someone who likes maps like I do, I think about stuff way too much. I think about the shape and the size and how big should this room be? Should it be adjacent to these other rooms? Blah blah blah. And I overthink about that. One thing I've started doing recently is if you have guidebooks for video games like Skyrim or the Final Fantasy games or probably some of the Zelda games as well, they always have maps of the various dungeons you can go through. Either take a picture of them or find them online and then just repurpose that map. It has 5 or 6 rooms, a few corridors, blah blah blah. Repurpose those now, and there's your D&D dungeon. What was previously a room where you'd find a couple of skeletons in Skyrim is now the dragon's lair in this, and there's a chest full of gold in there. Why not?
In a similar line, I think, because I know you haven't played the game, so you probably haven't seen. But if you ever look up any of the Soulsborne games, like your Dark Souls 1 to 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, that kind of stuff, and now Elden Ring, it was announced. But yeah, if you look up any walkthroughs for that, they'll very often give you like an area map. And you can look at it, and that's a really good resource to look at and kind of be like, okay, this is like a memorable or interesting like dungeon or cave layout, and you can just literally like you're saying, just okay, yeah, that was the village in Hemwick Charnel Lane, right? This is where my evil empire is now, or this is the Archdruid's tomb, or that kind of stuff, like you were saying. So yeah, just pro tip, definitely I would recommend checking out, particularly Bloodborne. Bloodborne has phenomenal level design that like spirals around in on itself, and there's like multiple paths and ways, and there's like a dead end in multiple ways, and like it's weirdly vertical as well. So yeah, FromSoft games for level design, if you're looking for inspiration for your dungeons, I would highly recommend them.
That's really good. I haven't played those games, therefore I would not want to do that, but I will add them to my repertoire of games that I'm going to steal dungeons from.
Yeah, particularly Bloodborne.
The one I ran you through over the last couple of weeks was an Elven rebel hideout that had been overrun by undead, and you guys were basically sent in to like clear out the undead so the rebels could move back in. I basically ran you through Bleak Falls Barrow, which was the first dungeon. Well, not counting the prologue area. But it was the first dungeon in Skyrim. If you go back and watch the original, very first footage ever of Skyrim that was shown, I believe at E3 in like 2010.
Oh Jesus, man, you're making me feel old here. I'm about to like.
Well,
I'm about to
it was
like Peter
2011 that
Parker.
it came out.
I don't. You're making me not feel so good right now. You know.
It was 2011 when it came out.
It would have been.
2010.
It would have been because I know it was 2011 for sure. Because I remember in my first year of college, everyone was playing Skyrim.
Well, I remember because the release date of Skyrim was 11/11/11.
Ah.
Yeah, they released on the 11th of November 2011, which was just the best release date ever and will never happen again for a very long time.
Very true.
For probably another what? You could have done 12/12/12 the following year, but no one did that, so you're probably been waiting about 1,000 years.
We'll never get back to 6th to 969 ever again, so it's okay.
No, we won't. But yeah,
we
that
could.
Was
we actually could. Never mind.
Do we want to though? So I basically ran you through that backwards. I took two levels because there's a couple different sections in Bleak Falls Barrow. I took them, I sat them on top of each other and meshed them together, and then I kind of just traced out the parts I liked, and then I ran you through Bleak Falls Barrow backwards, which actually ended up being very fun. So I mean, like definitely, just it's a common theme, and I will probably continue preaching this for as long as we do. We continue to do this podcast and beyond, because it's something I suffer with and something that I'm constantly trying to, train myself out of. Is don't do more work than you need to. Yeah. I'm constantly at Gavin for it. Gavin is a friend of ours who plays in our game, but also he is designing a campaign setting at the moment, stuff like that. And okay. I think I've called Dan out. I definitely called Mike out. I'm going to call Gavin out this week. Gavin showed me some sketches he did of different. He's basically doing like a diesel punk setting. But within D&D. And he did some currency. He redid the currency, and he showed me the different coins he had sketched. And he had like gold pieces were called gears, like G for gold. Copper pieces were called cogs. Silver pieces were called springs, I think, or something like that. I'm like, that's actually brilliant. I really, really love that. It fits in with the whole mechanical diesel punk world vibe. And he was asking, and I was like, I'm constantly at him for it. He's constantly telling me, no, it's fine. I was just doing it for fun. I'm like, okay, but still, I keep on target here because I'm like, that's really interesting. That's super fun. Is that like very beneficial or cohesive to a fun gameplay experience for your players? Not necessarily. It's fun, and like again, if I was in a game and he told me that was how his currency works, I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna make note of this, and I'll probably use it in game. But is it like something that's going to greatly benefit my enjoyment as a player? Probably not.
Time is your most valuable resource as a DM. And
time is just the most valuable resource, man. We're all going to die one day.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm joking.
No. But yeah, so I feel like, definitely focus on the big stuff, and in that light, and in that focus on the stuff that's important, the stuff that needs to be concrete, and you can fill in the gaps later on. But in that same vein of thought, if you can steal dungeon maps and stuff and not have to draw them manually every single time you want to run a dungeon, go online, go Dark Souls, go Legend of Zelda, go Skyrim,
the D&D subreddit, the D&D subreddit /D&D
subreddit. Go to any of the pre-existing adventure books, and many of them actually have maps of dungeon stuff already mapped out for you. I know Waterdeep Dragon House definitely has a few, so feel free to pull those and use those as your dungeon instead.
I believe there may actually be a r/D&D battle maps, which is a subreddit just for D&D battle maps that you could probably pick up some very useful stuff from.
Yeah. So like always be trying to. I have no way of saying this doesn't sound bad, but it's really beneficial. Always be trying to cheat and steal everything you can from other DMs and stuff like that, because do you know what? That's how the game goes.
I think I've got like a slightly more PR friendly answer to that.
Please do.
Work smart, not hard.
There you go. Work smart, not hard. That's way better than the thing I said. Always try to cheat and steal. Jesus, Connor. I'm gonna put that on a plaque.
I steal.
I'm gonna have next week. You're gonna come on up here on this wall. I'm gonna have a. Where's my finger going? Nope. There we go. Forgot how directions worked. There's gonna be a plaque right there, and it's gonna say, "Always try to cheat and steal."
Man, just Eddie Guerrero vibes. I lie, I cheat, I steal.
But yeah, how what kind of dungeons do you think you use most often? Is there anything? Do you use temples? Do you use caves? Do you use old mines?
I think you're like I've you've called out like 3 dungeons I've already done in that list. I have done a temple, which was another leader up to a boss fight. I did a dungeon under a gold mine that was actually like a UNT breeding nest. And there was
Ooh, that's cool.
and there was a yeah it was so it was a yeah it was actually the dungeon that the snake puzzle was for. So there was a big like chamber.
Oh, yeah.
It's pure inspired by the door in the Chamber of Secrets, where he like speaks Parslethum to it, and the snakes all move
Yeah,
around.
and it slithers around and
Yeah.
unlocks. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so
Love it.
that was like direct inspiration for that to have the things. So like, and in my head they moved in a similar way, in that like the snakes just like swung around and kind of clicked in and moved in. But yeah, that was yeah, basically like a UNT nest out in the desert under a gold camp, and like it had been there for ages, but like the gold mining had disturbed it, so they had started to come to the surface. They killed the miners. Then the people who employed the miners sent the party to find out what happened to the miners. And yeah, that was like a nest under. There's a temple, and then I think like a cave or a mine is probably the most common one I use, and I think that's probably true of a lot of DMs, because
Yeah,
geez, imagine trying to play D&D if you weren't allowed to send your party through a series of connected tunnels.
yeah. That would be yeah. I mean, it's in the title.
Yes.
Dungeons are in the title. That being said, there's a lot of different aspects, a lot of different ways to play D&D. You could do it entirely within a small town, and it could be social interactions and combats in city streets.
Yep.
You know, you could do wilderness stuff where you're not going into caves or underground. You're fighting in woods and on mountainsides and stuff like that. It could be something that is like very, very role play driven. It could be like a hex crawl. It could be a dungeon crawl. You know, there's a lot of different ways and different aspects to how you can play the game. I like to hit a few different markers as much as I can. I like to experiment, because if I feel like I'm doing one version or one way of playing the game for a long time, I will adapt and I'll just interject a little bit. Like, for example, the last dungeon we did was the well. That was, you guys were back. That was back when you were like somewhere between levels 5 and 10, but like maybe 6 or 7,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think 7 at the most.
Yeah, and now you guys are level 10, and now I have you running another dungeon again. There's been some other underground bits in between and a few things like that, but this is the next proper, fully mapped out dungeon with loot and traps and encounters and all this other stuff all planned in, and the rooms are numbered and stuff like that. So I don't use them terribly often. Fun fact, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler. The rest, no one else will know about this because we'll have already played it by the time this episode comes out. I do have a miniature hex crawl planned for the upcoming session.
Oh, very
So
cool.
I've made a smaller map of the forest you guys are in, and I'm gonna have you guys trotting around the forest, because I've never run a hex crawl before. I've had you navigate over, you know, like I've been like, okay, here's the map of the country. You want to go from this town to this town. That's this many hexes, so it's that many days worth of travel. Fine. I've done that stuff, but I haven't done it quite as in the same way that I'm doing it here. I'm doing it a little bit like Battleship. So like,
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you what hex do you want to move to, and I will tell you what, if anything, you encounter
That's
in that thing.
very
'Cause
like old school JRPG.
Yeah, or well, yeah, like yeah, or like yeah, exactly. Where you're moving across, and you may encounter some enemies or something like that, or like Pokemon when you go into the tall
Yeah.
grass, you don't know what's in the tall grass. So yeah, I'm kind of doing something like that, and I will have the master map, if you will, in front of me, and I'll know if hit stuff. But that's because, again, like I said, I've never run a hex crawl properly before.
Yeah.
This could be really fun, and it's kind of inspired by Tomb of Annihilation,
Oh, cool.
because a big part of the middle of that game, you start off and you go to like is it Port
Port
Nyanzaru?
Yeah, Port Nyanzaru. Near said Port Tamale, but that's Critical Role.
That's Wildmount, yeah, yeah. But I started off with that, and I was watching. You start off there, and you did definitely loads of activities to do in town, and then almost immediately for the central bulk of the game, you're just hex crawling away in search of some ruins in the jungle, but you don't know where they are, and they even give you a DM version of the map which shows everything,
Yeah.
and a blanked out player version of the map so you can flip it over, which I think is just brilliant. And yeah, it's really really cool. So I was kind of inspired by that, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to have you guys do a trek through the frozen forests, searching for stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, no, that sounds like I'm super down. I don't like you said, we've not really done much hex crawling.
Other than just calculating how long it takes to travel somewhere, no, not really.
Yeah, so yeah, this is pretty much a new experience for me. So I'm very excited to know what's coming up on Wednesday, which will be a lot of fun.
I actually don't do. This is a bit off topic, but I don't do encounters, or I don't roll for random encounters when you guys travel over open countryside. Um, because one, I think it could be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit boring if you're like, let's go, it's 8 days worth of travel, so let's roll for encounters for 8 days, and then for 8 days solid, you have to fight, a different encounter for 8 days. You'd be weeks traveling just to the next town.
Yeah.
Because I mean, combat takes a long time to run.
I was going to say drag your session out like mad.
Exactly. Yeah. You could literally be what 4 or 5 weeks just getting to the next town because it's taking you so long to run all these different combats.
Yeah.
If they're not typically go by.
If they're not crazy high health encounter combats, you could probably get maybe like 3 done in a session with a bit of traveling, and then you'd be like, okay, guys, next week we'll be back to I guess travel for another 3 days, and then we'll travel for another 2 days the week after that, and oh look, we'll be there now, and then we can pick up the rest of the game.
Yeah. And I don't get me wrong, I feel like there's like traveling in the open countryside and potentially running into a band of goblins or a giant or something like that is core to the game and very important. But I can't even tell you who it was. Very early on in my DMing career, I came across someone on YouTube, and she recommended something from older versions of D&D. I don't know if it was published anywhere or if it's something she kind of figured out for herself. But what she recommended is there's only 3 types of journeys in D&D. There's short journeys, there's medium journeys, and there's long journeys. And depending on how long the journey is intended to be, that's how many encounters you have. If you're going short journey to the next town over and it's a couple of days worth of travel, have 1 encounter on the road. If it's something that is to the very far north, and you need to travel across open countryside and along roads and over a mountain and stuff like that, have 3 full encounters. If it's just a way of kind of, because it'll add meat to the bones of the traveling part of the game, and it will make things feel like it was eventful. Because if I just say, right, you guys are going to travel to the next town, flash forward 8 days later, it doesn't feel like you traveled to the next town really. But if you had a couple things happen, one thing happen, it seems like it was quite a short travel to get there. If you have a full 3 things happen, 3 separate encounters that are quite big or whatever, that's going to feel like a sizable amount of events that have occurred. Therefore, time has passed. Therefore, it has been a journey getting here, And I've always thought that was a very good advice to have when planning encounters or planning travel time.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. Like it makes good logical sense. Like, because the reason that you would have more encounters is because you are out in the open for a longer period of time. You're probably going longer, more isolated paths, which leaves you open to attack from stuff like bandits or just wild animals. Maybe you have to pass by a mountain that is home to giants, and one of them happens to wander off down into the low hill, like the foothills of it.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. And yeah, no, I think again it's about using good judgment really to kind of pull that out. But yeah, like traveling is actually something I kind of struggle with a little bit as a DM, to keep interesting and to do. I usually try and keep it interesting by like I'll roll a 4 player, so I'll roll a d4, then depending on what the number comes, I'll have that player roll a d20 on a chart to determine the weather, and we'll kind of go with that. And then I'll have like that. I will have, like, if it's 5 days of travel, I'll probably have like 2 encounters in there spread over the course of the 5 days.
Yeah, that seems reasonable as well. I feel like 5 days is a decent journey. It's almost a week's worth of travel.
Yeah.
And I feel like two solid encounters.
Yeah.
Because the thing about encounter tables is oftentimes it's really throwaway stuff. It's like,
or it's crazy strong. Like I can't remember what random encounter table it is, but there was one of them. It's like one of the low level ones is like, oh, it's 4 bandits, and then like a medium level one is a young bronze dragon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like it could just make some of them just make no sense. You could be like, or it could be like, here's a combat encounter, but it's so trivial. It's like it just seems more like more of a bother than anything else. Like I'm traveling through the desert. Oh, you've rolled on the encounter table. You encounter 1d6 jackals, and it's like, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll kill some fucking dogs then. Like that's
Yeah,
it. But I mean, it doesn't feed into the story. If don't get me wrong, if you're doing XP leveling, I think maybe like random encounters
that's
could be
probably
very
where
core.
that's probably where it comes in more. It's probably because both of us do milestone.
We do milestone. Sorry to all the if you want to talk,
So
if you want to talk, hear us talk more about the differences between milestone and XP, watch our D&D hot takes episode a few episodes back. Because I discovered the person on Twitter who was literally the angriest in the world about milestone leveling.
I was going to be like, and apologies to that guy from our hot takes episode.
Yeah, yeah. He really didn't like milestone. But yeah, I mean, like, so I think if you're doing XP, obviously killing monsters, whether they be anything from jackals to young bronze dragons, is kind of core to being able to level your character. So that's fine. Or if you're just, the kind of players who are kind of not necessarily murder hobos, but just really combat oriented, that you just want to constantly be rolling dice to swing your great sword and behead things. That's also fine as well. If that's the kind of group you have, then I think the DM should probably cater to that to a certain degree and offer you plenty of combat in your campaign.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think that's totally fair. Connor, what about, I know with dungeons, how something I kind of struggle with on is like, because traditionally there should be traps in a dungeon if you're being traditional about it. How would you like, or what's your kind of philosophy when it comes to, because I think we did have a quick chat about traps before. Just what would you be your philosophy say when it comes to dungeon crawling? For like, how many traps should you put in? Like, how often should there be traps? Like, do you want to just kind of put in one or two early on to get them on their toes and kind of paranoid, or should there be like one like every like 50 feet or whatever?
Yeah, I think the thing about a trap is it's surprising, right? It's like, or it should be at least.
Yeah.
You should be like, here's the entrance to the dungeon. I walk down the steps, and then your DM turns to you and says, "Oh, this flagstone on the steps sinks into the ground, and you hear a clicking noise." And you're like, "Oh no!" And there's a moment of tension there. DM's like, roll a dexterity save, and all of a sudden some darts shoot out of the wall, and it's like that's a whole moment. If you do that, which it could be for a great moment, and it's exciting, it's eventful, it creates great tension and drama, and depending on how it turns out, resolution, maybe those darts will just damage you a little bit, maybe you get a couple of d4s worth of piercing damage, or maybe they're poisoned and now you can't wake up for 1d6 hours, and the rest of the party's like, well, crap, the barbarian's asleep. What are we going to do? We can't move him. He's too bloody heavy. And now they're just going to stuck here. It can create very interesting stuff, but I feel like if every single thing is a trap, then the surprise aspect wears off and it becomes more of a hindrance. Traps should be a challenge, and technically, when you trap a corridor, you're trying to hinder someone's entrance into that corridor, or at least the person in canon who placed that trap. But you shouldn't be hindering your player's progress. So I think I put okay, so the dungeon you guys just did, for example, had what? When I say, okay, I'm going to say rooms, but it's not really rooms. When I say rooms, I mean the rooms that had something of significance in them. You had the room with the gem, which is one. You had the room with the disciples in it, two. You had the room with the centipede, is three. You had the shrine, is four. I guess the war room where you found the intel was five, and then six was like the final boss room. We'll just say that after the moment, right? I put only 2 traps. Yes, only 2 traps in there. One of them being the gem trap, which was very early on. Which I think made sense because you want to defend. No point in you locking the door to your bedroom if all the windows and doors of your house are open. You put that trap on the outermost part of your base. So that was pretty near the
with
entrance.
people you hate.
Well, yeah, exactly. I lock my bedroom, and then everyone else outside can just, deal with the burglars and stuff.
Yeah, it's fine.
Um, but yeah, so I think that I did that one on the outside, which I think made sense thematically.
Mhm.
Which is again something that I overthink sometimes. I'm like, but why would there be a trap? Surely they would just put a wall here so no one could ever get in. Um, but so there's that, and then the second trap I had, which had an unusual effect, was there was a door into a war room where there was loads of documents and information and journals and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But because it's such sensitive information to these rebels, they rigged it so that these casks of alchemist fire would drop from the ceiling if the door wasn't opened correctly. And the thing is, I heard you. You actually said, "Should we check for traps?" No one else heard you. Either didn't hear you, or just didn't bother listening, or whatever. No one checked for traps. And then when you opened the door, a little string broke, and all the casks fell and basically set fire to everything in the room. And you just about made it out with a single map. But there would have been more you guys could have gotten from that.
Yeah.
And I think, but again, that's two traps over the course of about 6 or so rooms. If between every room, every single corridor between that, I had placed a spike trap or a swinging log or a swinging axe or something like that, I think after a certain point, one, it's like, okay, the thing about traps, there's not a huge amount players can do to resist them, typically speaking, other than rolling a saving throw of some kind,
Yeah.
And I think players are mostly willing to forgive the fact that there's a trap or a couple of traps in any given place. If this is a treasure room behind this door, it would make sense that maybe there's an axe that will swing down or something if you don't open the door right. But if you keep hitting your players with these traps, which they have no way, I mean, they can check for traps and stuff like that, but also they might fail that investigation check and find nothing, and then you're like, you get hit with yet another axe. Eventually, it wears a bit thin. So I think, depending on the dungeon, unless you're doing something like Tomb of Annihilation or what's it, Tomb of Horrors?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say don't overdo it on the traps. Do a couple here and there. Again, if you're doing them too close together, then the surprise aspect wears off.
Yeah.
Those two were basically the start and end of this dungeon that I put in, and I think that I did that on purpose because I'm like, oh, trap in the entrance makes sense, and also it's early in the dungeon. No more traps to worry about, although you guys were checking, and that's responsible to do as a party. And then towards the end, there was another trap. Great. If you just pepper, if every single thing is a trap, then
Yeah.
like then you can't drink a cup of coffee without getting a knife in the face. Like you can't move.
Yeah.
And I think that's restrictive. And I think I think players will forgive like, oh damn it, we didn't check for traps. But if every single thing is a trap and every single thing is going to hurt them, they're going to be like, okay, the DM's clearly trying to hurt us here, and that's not what you want to be doing necessarily.
Yeah, no, of course not. You want to catch them off guard and surprise them. You don't necessarily want to hurt them. And I think I would agree with your perspective on that. Where like if you put a lot of them there, you start getting into the territory of the law of diminishing returns. Where like if you put in one really good trap, people will remember that, particularly if it's damaging and someone fails. But if you put in like 7 just traps, like 7 blow dart traps, everyone blows past them. They're not even going to remember that when they're thinking about the dungeon.
Yeah. I would definitely go for quality over quantity. Do like definitely do like don't do like you said 7 different blow dart traps or pit traps, because one, it's uncreative, and two, like even if they only do a little bit of damage, that's just a bit more of an annoyance that you have people constantly making checks and that they're constantly taking little bits of damage. I think it's far more memorable and far more traumatic if they go into a room and a big gem shocks them for 60-10 or 80-10 damage, and they go, holy shit, that gem is really deadly. And then they figure out a way to resolve it, and that's that done. They move on to the next room, great. But like, I think that's way more dramatic, because if I go to you guys, especially you're like level 10 now, if I go to you guys and I go, oh, you triggered a trap, you take 2d4 piercing, that's 3 damage, that's going to be like, oh, all right, I guess I take that damage and I continue going. It's not, there needs to be enough damage or enough risk that you feel like something has genuinely almost gone horribly wrong because of this trap. But then likewise, you don't want to be just like going, you get hit with a dart. All right, next room you get hit with 2 more darts and another dart.
Jeez, I just had the thought of a really messed up trap. As you're
Go
saying
on.
that. Do you know the weighted net trap?
Yes, you told me about this before, yeah.
That, but the ends of the net are connected to a pulley hidden beneath the floor, so that when the net falls, it continues to be pulled down as it reels itself in under the ground.
Yeah, you're a messed up individual.
It's definitely. Do you remember that scene in Predator where he catches one
Yes.
of the Marines and like
I
that net?
think
and
we
goes-
brought this up the last time you brought up this trap in our traps episode.
Quite possible.
Where
I love Predator. Predator is one of my favorite films of all time.
they pierced into the stone, and then the spikes started winding and spooling up, and the net got tighter and tighter on the alien, and like
Oh no
pierced
no
into
no!
its...
He did it to a person first in Predator, and it doesn't go as well for the person as it did for the alien.
I haven't seen Predator. For some reason, Alien versus Predator is in my head, which is
It was,
yeah,
I liked it when I was 14.
nice idea. So did I.
Yeah. But Predator is a great movie, and you should totally watch it because that scene, Jesus.
I have seen it, just not in a very long time. But yeah, that's something else I was going to say about traps. Basically, yeah, don't overdo the traps. And if you're going to do traps, go quality over quantity. It's far more interesting, far more fun to be like, whoa, do you remember that time that one trap happened that did this really wacky thing? As opposed to, no one's going to say, hey, do you remember the time we went through that tunnel and we got hit with 9 different dart traps in 9 different rooms?
Yeah.
Like,
And not all traps have to do damage either. Traps could inflict a condition. They could blind someone for a little bit, deafen someone for a
they
little
could
bit.
blind you, put you to sleep. You guys triggered a sleep trap. Actually, you didn't specifically because you were playing an elf.
Yeah.
I had a sleep trap going into a Dragonborn enclave in campaign 1, and you guys went in and I rolled all the... Basically a very high level sleep spell went off, and I was like, this will probably get a couple of them, and I was like, oh wait a second, 3 out of the 5 people are elves. So then the dwarf and the Dragonborn just keeled over flat on the ground, and the 3 of you were like, what's going on? So yeah, put you to sleep. Look at all the different conditions in the back of the PHP, and go like, what of these could I implement? Does it poison me? Does it put me to sleep? Does it just incapacitate me? Am I paralyzed? Does the party have to now carry me because I'm paralyzed for 1d4 hours? Does it
Petrification.
turn me to stone?
Yeah.
You got it. I was waiting to say it until the last. If you're particularly evil, is that gem that's glowing on the far side of the room as you look into the next chamber? Is that a basilisk's eye that's mounted into a stand, and if you get it too close with it, it'll turn you to stone? I don't know.
Oh no, that's evil. The net thing I came up with was just horrifying. That's actually evil because you were like, ooh, there's a gem over there. I'm gonna go and look at it.
And then it looks back at you, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're made of granite.
At least my trap is like hidden and just horrible. Yours is like sly. I think sly is worse.
Sly is what I do, man. I'm sorry, but sly is what I do. We're probably going to wrap up relatively soon. Martin,
Cool.
very quickly, any standout dungeons that you have run through or run yourself?
Definitely the one under Onyx Tomb that we were talking about earlier. That one with the encroaching wall of darkness that was just going to do all horrible things to our soul. That one absolutely stood out because I just remember that was one of the biggest instances of just, okay, what's going on? I guess I can't fight. Oh God, run! Like that was, I remember that one particularly well. And just because it was such a cool ending as well, because I think it was literally like the rogues like sprinted off and like flipped up the stones and out, and like the monk like just used her crazy monk speed to like run.
I'm pretty
and,
sure she like
bounce.
corkscrewed through just running in a corkscrew fashion through things. She had so much speed she could spare it like.
Yeah, and then like I was able to, I think I like flew, I just about fit through with my angel wings and my armor. Like I had to like fold in the wings at the last possible moment and like
chuck 'em at the last second,
straight through, and then just like the dimension door to finish it when we were all like, what are you doing? That was really great. I really enjoyed that one. The one we just came out of, particularly because of how close that final boss fight was, in the Elven
That
Forest.
was, yeah.
Oh, we very nearly had a TPK, folks. It was a real close run thing.
I only figured out when I went to look at some of the stat blocks of the monsters I used after the fact that the greater zombies, I think they're called, were from Tomb of Horrors, which which I didn't realize. I had 4 greater zombies, a cadaver collector, and a deathlock mastermind. Uh, and you guys, to be fair, honestly, yes, you got very lucky because
Oh, we got super
you
lucky
managed to. What happened? The warlock cast our Hunger of Hadar on an area where the deathlock mastermind was, and then the blood hunter used his right of or his
Blood
brand
Curse of the Binding.
blood curse to the binding, so he couldn't move, and he has no strength, so he kept failing it. So I had him dimension door to a different room further back in the dungeon that he would come up behind you. But the thing is, for literally 3 or 4 goes in a row, whenever I rolled to make the save at the end of his turn, he couldn't succeed on a DC 16 strength save. So he was actually out. He teleported away because he would have just kept taking damage from Hunger of Adar otherwise. And I didn't want him dying, so I'm like, he'll teleport away and he'll come back into the fight when he can. Turns out that basically just took him out of the fight for a solid 4 rounds. And then you had the Cadaver Collector, and I think 1, if not 2, of the zombies dead by the time he got back. And then you managed to mop up him in the last couple.
I think he went first, then the Cadaver Collector. No, sorry,
No,
you're right.
Cadaver-
No, the Cadaver Collector definitely went first, actually. Yeah. No, yeah.
Which was also lucky because the Cadaver Collector just used its
Jesus.
recharge ability to summon 6. I think I rolled for 6.
Yeah, it was.
No,
yeah.
it wasn't tight. It was 4. It was 4.
It was a lot.
It was too many. I rolled for like 6 or 4 phantoms.
Spectres.
No, specters, and I always get a mix up. And he just summoned them, and luckily I think they got 1 round of attacks in which none of them hit, very luckily, and then the blood hunter managed to shoot the cadaver collector through the head, killing it, and then of course they all get dispelled and vanish as well.
Thank Christ, because
But
if they stuck around, that was going to be grim.
We also had a fight which I didn't think was that big of a deal. It was meant to be kind of just a mini fight halfway through the dungeon where there was a necrotic centipede. This thing does like 60, 10 plus 7 piercing damage and then 3d6 necrotic on top of that. And on the warlock, who has I believe the least amount of armor class,
Yeah.
and certainly the least amount of health, it got a critical bite attack against him, which did 101 points of damage
No, it
in a
was like
single
100.
attack.
Was it like 111?
No, it was 101, I think.
Oh, okay.
On what I rolled there. It was 101 points of damage, which dropped him to 0 instantly. And then the thing is, like, the way that thing works is that it bites you, but then it restrains you once you're bitten. And then on its next turn, it would have swallowed him and he would have been taking acid damage and stuff. He had a turn to make it out of that. And luckily you as a barbarian went up and pried the mandibles of the centipede open and got him out. But it was between that and the end fight then with the cadaver collector and stuff, that was a hairy one, yeah.
But one thing you're leaving out of that centipede fight is that our warlock almost took enough damage from an opportunity attack to instantly die.
Yeah, that 101.
I think he had like 10 or 15 points of damage before it would have been like double his hit points and just
It was something small.
gone.
It wasn't much at all because I think he was on, I want to say 60 something.
Yeah, I think he's like 60, 70 something, like low 60s or low 70s.
Low 60s, I think it was, and he had 70 something max health, and then he did 101 points, which puts him like almost 40 something into the negative. So I think 10 or 15 more.
Well, if he's
Something like that. I can't remember.
I think he's like 72, so double that would be like 144. So yeah, you'd only about like. Yeah, I think you'd only about like.
He was already down about 20 health though, so
he was. Yeah.
If another 15, 20 points of damage, and yeah, it would have been an instant kill. Which again, I didn't think that would be such a big deal because that creature only gets 1 attack per turn. It's a big attack, but he gets 1 attack. So action economy wise, and we've discussed this before on the podcast, action economy wise, that shouldn't have been as challenging as it was. But I think when one character got insta downed,
Yeah.
everyone started to panic, and no one was necessarily attacking. Also, I did a sneaky thing, and here's an example of how I'm sly. I put 2 giant centipedes into the encounter, which are meant to be the babies of this big centipede, and those things had 4 points of health each. My characters could have looked at them and they would have keeled over dead, but I purposely wanted the players to burn actions on killing these other centipedes. which worked, by the way.
Yeah, no, that was pretty funny. All right. But yeah, Jesus, it was a close run thing, but yeah, just by the end of it, I was just like, holy crap! Like, that's probably the closest.
That wasn't meant to be as deadly as it ended up being at all. It was certainly one of those things where, like, again, I guess, well, look, a natural 20 can turn most fights around for better or for worse. So I think that
Yeah,
I
no,
think that in this case
I think we got
yeah.
our own. I think we got our own back when, like, towards the end of that second fight, I got a few really nasty crits. I got like one or two nasty crits that were like, because the I have Piercer now as well, so I had like Piercer, and then I had like extra weapon damage die, and then it was like all this crazy stuff. So
How many more levels do you have to go into Barrow until you get brutal critical?
we're close to leveling now, aren't we?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, so next will be level 7, so I need another 3 barb levels to get brutal critical.
Oh, it's a 10th level thing, is it?
9th.
Oh, ninth. Okay.
So
okay,
I need to
enough,
level
yeah.
up 3 more times and I'll get it. But I sort of have like a mini brutal critical because of Piercer.
Because of Piercer. When you get to brutal critical, you're going to be rolling 2 additional weapon damage dice on that crit, which is absolutely insane.
Yes, I am.
But Martin,
Yes, Connor.
that's all the time we have for today.
Ooh, time flies, time flies, time flies. Especially when you're talking about dungeons.
Exactly. I think that went pretty well.
Some minor
I
technical difficulties.
well, look, it happens. But I mean, like, dungeons. I think dungeons are such a not just because the name is in the title or whatever.
It's the
or
other
words in
D.
the title. It's the other D in D&D. But I do think that they are a core part of the game. I think that they make for very fun encounters that can kind of when you're playing things very big and you're going like you're traveling across countries or whole cities and stuff like that. Dungeons can be this really cool, like, slow pace thing when you have to. It's literally a crawl where you're deciding, how am I entering this room? Am I checking for traps? How many enemies are in here? You're going room by room rather than just going like taking these big leaps across entire countries and stuff. I think dungeons can be a really good pacing change of pace. Literally, they change the pacing of the game, and can be very very fun for all the players. To have to use skill checks, avoid traps, have encounters with monsters and stuff like that, and in the end, hopefully come out with a bit more XP and a few magic items and whatnot.
Yeah, totally. Like, I think it's the good thing about a dungeon is you can kind of fit all the main pillars of D&D into it. You got your exploration, your combat, and your
Social.
social. Jesus, thank you. How did
Yeah.
I forget the third pillar?
Yeah. Which actually you guys got in the most recent dungeon as well, because you decided to interrogate one of the Elven rebels you fought.
Yes, yes, yes.
So there was a social aspect to it as well. If you have any questions you'd like us to ask, stories you'd like us to cover, or topics you would...
You okay, Connor?
If you have any questions you would like to ask, stories you would like to share, or topics you would like us to cover, please tweet us at MicFlayers on Twitter. You'll find it on the lower screen. You can find our podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Martin, where can you find you on... you can find our podcast on YouTube and Spotify at 6 p.m. Irish time every Friday.
Indeed.
Boom. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
Mostly I can be found right here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday. But aside from that, you can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is boom, right there down in the bottom right hand corner. And you'll also find me on the Micflayers podcast Twitter an awful lot of the time as well. Which is also in the furthest bottom right hand corner of the screen. Other than that, I stream occasionally, but I've been pretty tired and busy lately, so I haven't been doing a whole bunch of that. But yeah, I've got some. I've an entire VOD of Devil May Cry 5 if you're interested in that up at the moment. So that was my most recent playthrough, and I've done a little bit of the new Assassin's Creed playthrough. So hoping to get back to that when I'm a bit more when I have a bit more time, I suppose.
Perfect. You guys can find me on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1N, very important.
Forgot it.
And like I said, you're okay. I've already been a Hames to this outro anyway, so don't worry about it. And like I said, every Friday here at 6 p.m. Irish time on the Micflayers podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Later, folks.